to The Briefing, a co-production of Now This and The Appeal. I'm John Matthews, Senior Legal Counsel of the Justice Collaborative. You can find me on Twitter at John A. Matthews2. Today we are talking about our future on the ballot, where it's election season and we're really trying to highlight transformational candidates around the country. We're turning to a really important race in Maricopa County, Arizona, where there is a second district seat on the County Board of Supervisors up, and we're joined by Deedra Abboud, an activist and attorney who's running for that seat. Deedra, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. You too.
So let's talk about your background. You have a background in civil rights law, and you're an activist. How does that influence your decision in the politics in Maricopa County?
Well, spending 15 years holding politicians accountable, and basically like so many other Americans in 2016, 17, and 18, we decided let's, get in and change things from the inside. Too long, we've sat back and said, politics is dirty, let somebody else do it, and just let people who are willing to compromise the Constitution and civil rights and the safety of our neighbors, they were willing to compromise that for their own gain. So we normal people decided, let's get in and do it differently.
So running for office is really hard. Can you describe a moment for you, whether it was a client or someone in the community you were working with, where you said, this is the moment I need to get in and run for office and try to make people's lives better?
It was actually a lot of things. I think in 2017, what happened was we were having all of these empty chair town halls because Senator Flake, who was our senator at the time, wasn't getting out into the community, had never had a town hall. And, people were really wanting to talk to their representatives. So basically I stood up and said, I think I can run a campaign to show people how it should be done, how it could be done. And then they know that they can demand that of the people that they elect in office.
So you've talked a lot about transparency, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what a board of supervisors is, what a supervisor does. Can you talk a little bit about that and really just try to educate some of our viewers out there?
It's really a travesty to our democracy that the largest government agency an elected agency at that, within Maricopa County, which is one of the largest counties in the country in geography, population, and budget, $3 billion, that they don't even know the Board of Supervisors exists. They don't know that they have an elected supervisor for a district that they live in. Most people didn't even know that in addition to congressional districts and legislative districts, they also have a county district. It's ridiculous that these supervisors who are elected and paid by the taxpayer never get out, never talk, never explain, never answer questions. And that's not how we should be functioning on any level, but particularly on the local level, because Maricopa County Board of Supervisors affects your daily life daily. It's so intimate. The $3 billion budget from your tax dollars goes into almost 500 authorities, boards, commissions, departments, and special taxing districts that relate to every issue you can imagine. The county is involved, whether it's environment, safety, roads, infrastructure, libraries, schools, absolutely animal control, protecting animals. Everything you can imagine is done by the Board of Supervisors. And they have the power of the purse. They have the power of appointment, because they appoint all of the administrators and boards for all these entities. And they have the power of the policy. The Board of Supervisors sets the policy for the whole county, which includes more than 24 towns and cities within it, as well as something strange that we call county islands, which are in the mailing address named as a part of a city or town, but the County Board of Supervisors actually is over it for everything from zoning to the Sheriff's Department.
So thank you for mentioning the Sheriff's Department. Well, let's back up a little bit. I live in Long Beach, so I'm not that familiar with Maricopa County. What city do you live in?
I live in Scottsdale.
Okay.
Next door to Phoenix.
Awesome. So can you talk a little bit about what's happening there, especially you mentioned the sheriff. So Maricopa County is the largest county in Arizona, and has the third highest rate of police violence in the country. Why is there so much police violence in Maricopa County? Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's actually not in Maricopa County. It's only in one city, the largest city within Maricopa County. Like I said, there's 24, more than 24 cities and towns within Maricopa County. Maricopa County itself, when you take into account the entire area, isn't the most violent city or has the most police brutality. But yes, one of our cities does have that designation, unfortunately. Within the sheriff's department, we had, Sheriff Arpaio, and he got sued for all of these violations. It's one of the reasons why I was aware of the Board of Supervisors when I decided to run for it, because I spent so much time at their meetings explaining to them that Arpaio was breaking the law and that we would have to pay. And as of 2020, we've paid $178 million for Arpaio lawsuits, and we still have lawsuits pending. And he hasn't been in office in 4 years. But in 2014, due to one of the court cases, the Sheriff's Department was required to purchase body cams for all of their law enforcement officers. That was for the county Sheriff's Department. That did not apply to the cities. So, they came up in different ways, and some of them have and some of them don't. And then Paul Penzone, who's the current sheriff, he has supported the body cams. In fact, he's gone a step further and required that there's a whole division that does random audits on a regular basis. And they also require sergeants to review video for the deputies during the course of a shift. They don't just wait for people to complain about what an officer did.
What other plans do you have to reduce police violence and law enforcement violence generally in Maricopa County? So you've talked a little bit about body cams, but thinking about the power of the purse, like you mentioned, and other methods, what do you have in mind?
Well, one of the things the Board of Supervisors could have done under Sheriff Arpaio is, although the Sheriff's Department has their own budget, the Board of Supervisors has to approve it. And while the Board of Supervisors can't tell the departments what not to put or what to put into the budget, they can tell them what they can't pay for. So they could have said that the Arpaio could not pay for violations of civil rights, the racial profiling that happened. We can't talk about police brutality or criminal justice reform without addressing qualified immunity. Now, that is above the pay grade of a county board of supervisors, but we need to have that conversation, because qualified immunity basically says if a law enforcement officer can claim that they feared for their life, even if the article present was a spatula from the kitchen, then they can not be held accountable for anything that they do. It also allows for a law enforcement officer to claim that they did in fact violate a civil right, but they didn't know that they violated a civil right, even though it's like Fourth Amendment, for example, which is in the Constitution, and we got it in civics class. So qualified immunity has to be addressed at a higher level, but we need to have the conversation on the local level. Police union contracts is a big issue in Phoenix and Maricopa County, because the police unions require in the contracts that officers have the right to remove complaints from their file. So that means that the media, when they do public information requests, they don't receive the information about complaints that are filed against an officer. Also, it means that when an officer goes to another job interview for being a police officer or gets terminated, that information is not included in their HR file. The Brady list is another one. It is a list of officers who have proved untruthfulness. And yet the Brady list is not used by law enforcement agencies in their hiring decisions. So, I mean, these are all things that can be addressed on all levels, including the county level. And we need to have those conversations.
So another major issue that's come up in Maricopa County is immigration and detention, and these, having a big detention center. And Trump obviously has spoken about the treatment of immigrants to this country. What does a board of supervisor, what is the county board of supervisors, what power is in that office to change and make life better for immigrants?
Well, we have the power of the purse, the power of appointment, and the power of policy. So for one, in policy, we can determine as a county that we will or will not allow certain activities. For example, racial profiling by our law enforcement. Power of the purse, we cannot allow for departments to spend money on programs that are racially motivated or racially disparate with those outcomes. We also have the appointment. With all of these almost 500 entities under the Board of Supervisors, we can appoint people who are committed to changing and making sure that everybody is uplifted. The other thing is, as far as ICE in the jails. So Arpaio invited ICE in the jails, and he even signed on to a particular law that allowed for Arpaio to get money for allowing ICE to literally come in and take over the jails and go through every single person's status. Penzone cannot, no local law enforcement can restrict the federal government from doing their job. So what a local law enforcement can do is they can not be a surrogate and do the federal law enforcement jobs for them, but they can't stop the federal government from doing their job. So just like you can't, the jail can't prevent the FBI from coming in and talking to an inmate or investing in an inmate. You also can't do that for any other DEA or ICE. You have to allow the federal government to do their job. We are a hierarchy system, but you can make them do their own job and you not do their job for them.
So your opponent, Steve Chukri, is a lobbyist for the restaurant industry, and he's used his position on the board to fight against the minimum wage increase. How much do these kind of conflicts of interest play into what the board has done in the past?
Well, we have known violations and we have suspected violations. So first of all, let me just point out the Arizona Restaurant Association is not mom and pop restaurants. There's a separate association for that. They're mainly vendors for restaurants. One of the conflicts of interest of concern would be that if the restaurants are violating, because there's two entities, the environmental agency and then also the health department agency, who go into restaurants and do audits and inspections to make sure that they're complying with health code law, which, by the way, the Board of Supervisors did not give them authority to enforce anything to do with the pandemic. So any restaurant that's violating pandemic regulations, there's no enforcement from these agencies. So if, let's say that a restaurant had a violation, then technically they could call their Board of Supervisor and say, hey, I'm a member of your restaurant association and one of your agencies is coming after me, can you stop it? We don't even want that perception within the Board of Supervisors. Also, my opponent gave a piece of legislation in February to the Arizona State Legislature that would have banned local cities from being able to require large venues to have fire sprinklers. Large venues were 300 people or more that serve alcohol. And it was a result of 150 people dying in a fire because a large venue did not have fire sprinklers. That only helps very small, minute group of people. That does not help society at large. And one more thing, he's also the consular for the Republic of Estonia, which means he's being paid by the country of Estonia to represent the country of Estonia in Arizona. And I can't find anybody else in an elected position in the United States on any level who's being paid by a foreign government to represent the foreign government while they're also elected to a local government.
Wow, I don't even know what to say about that. So, we're facing a global pandemic. A lot of people are struggling. What changes would you like to make on the County Board of Supervisors to help people that are struggling?
Well, we have to look at now and later because first of all, we have a pandemic. And so we need to worry about now. The Board of Supervisors got, almost $400 million from the CARES Act. And they put, for example, $24 million into helping small businesses and then made the qualification so restrictive that no small businesses qualified for it. So they could save the money for later use instead of helping people now. They put $30 million into helping renters and trying to prevent homelessness. They only spent like 10% of that before, by the time August came around. And yet we have our renters are being evicted, even though we have a Stop Renters Act or a Stop Evictions Act or executive order right now. People are still being evicted, and they only approved like 10% of the applications for renters assistance within 4 months. And people need the rent now. Later on, we also need to think about, our infrastructure, we're $7 billion in the hole on infrastructure maintenance. That makes our commuters unsafe. And one of the primary responsibilities of the Board of Supervisors is safety. We need to look at, our environmental impact. We need to have very specific long-term plans for expanding, because we are one of the largest growing counties. We need to expand in a responsible way that improves our livability, that improves our property values, and also doesn't negatively impact our communities and our future generations. There's a lot to do, and a lot of it comes out of Maricopa County.
So I'd like to transition a little bit. So I've noticed you have a cooking blog, and there's not a ton of time to cook during a campaign. So I wanted to see what your go-to recipe is these days.
Funny enough, without the driving during a campaign, I've actually been able to cook more than I ever have before. And, with the shutdowns, everything's homemade. And we've had a lot of fun. I've been experimenting. I love to do cooking from all over. We've experimented with some South Korean recipes, and I duplicated the Benihana's fried rice. It was so awesome. I'm spending actually a lot of time doing things from scratch, and I'm really enjoying it.
So when you're not cooking, what's your favorite restaurant in the district?
A local place called Cafe Pino. It's Italian, and they are a family business, and they're immigrants, and they have some of the best Italian food, which is interesting because they're not from Italy, but their food is so awesome, and it's in Scottsdale. But yeah, Cafe Pino is my go-to. It's the first place that I got to go once people opened up businesses here. I went there and got to go.
All right, I'll have to check it out. What's the worst restaurant?
Gosh, Panda Express.
Nice. You mentioned we. So who is we? You said we're cooking and we're, experimenting. Who's we?
So a very interesting thing too, I've been married for 20 years, and my husband barely knew how to boil an egg. He knew how to make coffee. And during this pandemic, he has been a kitchen extraordinaire. I mean, he understands the science of putting stuff together. It's been so exciting. So now we cook together, which is, I don't think ever would have happened without the pandemic.
Amazing. What's lesson, I've heard you speak about your relationship. What's one lesson you have from your marriage that you applied in running for office?
Communication, 100% communication, even uncomfortable communication, but we have to communicate. Whatever you're thinking or feeling, you need to share it with your partner, and in a public space, however and why ever you've made a decision, you need to be able to articulate why you made that decision.
Amazing. So I'm constantly working on my communication. I appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate you joining us for, an episode of The Briefing. Like I said, we're really trying to explore what candidates are doing around the country and show that there's momentum for transformative ideas. So I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Anytime.
And for everybody out there, full episodes of The Briefing will be available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts and wherever you listen to podcasts. We're live again tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific to talk about voting rights in California's Prop 17. Please follow Appeal News on Facebook and The Appeal on Twitter for the latest news. All right, thanks so much.